Picture this. The most advanced alien civilizations in the galaxy are having what can only be described as a complete meltdown. The Galactic Council Chamber, think United Nations but with tentacles and energy beings, has gone dead silent. And when I say dead silent, I mean the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone stops talking? Multiply that by about 1,000, and you're getting close to the atmosphere in that massive chamber. This isn't your typical government building either. We're talking about a structure that spans 3 different dimensions, with representatives from over 200 species floating, sitting, slithering, or just existing in whatever way their biology allows. The air itself shimmers with translation fields working overtime to convert thoughts, sounds, chemical signals, and things humans don't even have words for into something everyone can understand. But right now, none of that matters because everyone's focused on the same terrifying reality playing out on the massive holographic displays surrounding them for 3 whole cycles. That's about 9 Earth months of those keeping track. These super advanced aliens have been watching something called a void swarm just eat everything in its path. And I don't mean eating like you and I eat pizza on a Friday night. These biomechanical nightmares were consuming entire star systems, breaking them down into their component atoms, and rebuilding themselves stronger, smarter, and more dangerous with every meal. Think of it like this. Imagine if every time you fought a video game boss, it remembered exactly how you beat it, then came back immune to your strategy, and with new attacks specifically designed to counter your playstyle. Except instead of losing a life, entire civilizations were being wiped from existence. The swarm wasn't just destroying things randomly either. These creatures, if you can even call them that, were learning from every weapon fired at them, every strategy thrown their way, every desperate last stand. They'd analyze the technology, absorb the knowledge, and then incorporate it into their own ever-evolving arsenal. It was like fighting an enemy that got a PhD in kicking your specific, but every time you engage them, the energy-manipulating Zephyrians went first. These beings could literally bend starlight to their will, create shields from pure energy, and fire weapons that could punch holes through planets. They threw everything they had at the swarm, confident their mastery over the fundamental forces of the universe would be enough. The swarm studied their energy patterns for exactly 47 minutes, then started firing the Zephyrians' own weapons back at them with improvements the original creators had never even dreamed of. Next up were the crystal computer aliens called the Thek. Imagine beings made of living crystal, whose brains work like quantum supercomputers, processing millions of calculations simultaneously across multiple dimensions. These weren't just smart, they were intelligence incarnate, capable of predicting outcomes thousands of moves in advance like some cosmic chess master. Their quantum brains couldn't even calculate a way out of this mess. Every scenario they ran, every possibility they explored, ended the same way, total extinction. But here's where it gets really scary. Even the ancient preservers were talking evacuation. These beings are so old, they make dinosaurs look like yesterday's news. They watched entire galaxies form, witnessed the birth and death of countless civilizations, seen species rise from primordial ooze to cosmic empires, and then fade into forgotten history. They survived ice ages, cosmic collisions, and reality-threatening catastrophes that would make most species curl up in a corner and cry. If the preservers, beings who consider a million-year war a brief skirmish, are ready to pack up and leave, you know things are about as bad as they can get. The swarm was heading straight for the galactic core, following the densest concentration of inhabited worlds like some cosmic shark following a blood trail. Trillions of lives were just sitting there like sitting ducks, completely unaware that their doom was approaching at speeds that bent the laws of physics. We're talking about civilizations that had never known war, species that had achieved perfect harmony with their environments, worlds where the biggest problem was deciding which flavor of synthesized nutrients to have for breakfast. And nobody, absolutely nobody, had an answer. The greatest minds in galactic history were stumped. Military strategists with millions of years of experience were drawing blanks. Scientists who could manipulate matter at the subatomic level were throwing their hands up in defeat. The mathematical reality was simple and terrifying. At the swarm's current rate of expansion and adaptation, the entire galaxy would be consumed within 50 cycles. Every world, every species, Every trace of civilization that had taken billions of years to develop will be nothing more than raw material for an enemy that grew stronger with every victory. That's when someone mentioned quarantined species from the rim worlds, being so dangerous that the civilized galaxy had basically built a fence around their entire sector and put up a sign saying, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." Nobody knew it yet, but salvation was about to come from the most unlikely source imaginable. Ambassador Kexthel is sitting there with reports spread across his desk, and every single one tells the same story. First, you hit the swarm and think, "Hey, we got this." Then the swarm goes, "Thanks for the lesson," and comes back stronger. Then it's game over. But let me paint you the full picture of just how bad things had gotten in that war room. Kexthel had been in diplomatic service for over 3 centuries. His species, the Vorthak, were known throughout the galaxy for their analytical minds and their ability to stay calm under pressure. Think of them as the ultimate crisis managers of space. The kind of beings you call when your star was about to go supernova and you needed someone to negotiate an evacuation treaty with 15 different species in 3 hours. But right now, Kexthel's usually steady hands were shaking as he flipped through battle report after battle report. Each document told the exact same horror story, just with different ships, different worlds, different species getting completely obliterated. Take the Battle of Nexus Prime, for example. The Coalition forces had gone in with their best ships, their most experienced commanders, and a battle plan that had taken their top strategists 6 months to perfect. The initial assault was textbook perfect. They hit the swarm formation from 3 angles, used coordinated energy bursts to disrupt their biomechanical systems, and for exactly 12 minutes, it looked like they might actually win. Then the swarm did something that defied every law of military engagement ever written. Instead of retreating or regrouping, they started reshaping themselves mid-battle. Those energy bursts that had been so effective, the swarm absorbed the frequency patterns and began generating their own versions, but stronger and more precise. The 3-angle attack formation that had worked so brilliantly became the swarm's new favorite tactic, except they improved it and used it to wipe out the remaining coalition forces in under an hour. These things didn't just blow stuff up, they absorbed it. Your technology, your knowledge, even your biology became part of their ever-growing arsenal. It was like fighting an enemy that got smarter every time you punched it. Imagine playing chess against an opponent who not only remembered every move you made, but could also read your mind, predict your strategy, and then use your own tactics against you with perfect execution. The reports kept getting worse. The Crystalline Defense Fleet had thrown their quantum disruptors at the swarm, weapons that could literally break apart matter at the subatomic level. The swarm spent exactly 37 minutes studying the quantum patterns, then started producing their own disruptors that were not only more powerful, but could target the specific crystalline structure of their creators. An entire fleet of beings who had never known defeat in 1,000 years of warfare was turned into space dust using their own technology. The Oceanic Collective tried biological warfare, releasing engineered viruses designed to break down the swarm's organic components. The swarm incorporated the viruses into their own biology and used them to create new types of warriors that were immune to biological attacks and could spread rapidly across star systems like some cosmic infection. So the War Council did what any rational group would do. They ran every computer simulation, checked every database, consulted every expert. Military historians pulled up records of every major conflict in galactic history. Xenobiologists analyzed the swarm structure looking for weaknesses. Physicists tried to find some fundamental law of the universe that the swarm couldn't break or adapt to. The answer was always the same. Run. Pack up the core worlds and get the hell out of Dodge. But here's the thing about running from an enemy that learns from everything. Where exactly do you run to? The swarm wasn't just following the major space lanes or targeting the biggest civilizations. It was systematically consuming everything in its path, learning from each encounter, and getting better at hunting down fleeing populations. Every evacuation route the Council planned, the swarm could predict and counter. Every safe haven they identified, the swarm could reach faster than the refugees could flee. The mathematics were brutal and simple. At current rates, they had maybe 50 cycles before the swarm reached the core worlds where the majority of galactic civilization lived. That might sound like a lot of time, but when you're trying to evacuate trillions of beings across thousands of star systems, 50 cycles is like trying to empty an ocean with a coffee cup. But then, and this is where it gets interesting, some junior aide mentions something that makes old Kexthol's alien equivalent of ears perk up. This wasn't even a proper intelligence report, just a random note buried in some old exploration logs that most people had forgotten existed. Apparently, there were rumors about some quarantined species way out on the rim worlds, being so violent, so absolutely unhinged, that the civilized galaxy had basically put a do not disturb sign on their entire sector. The quarantine had been in place for so long that most current officials didn't even remember why it existed. Just that there was this whole region of space that was marked with big red warning signs in every galactic database. The aide mentioned it almost as a joke, like, hey, maybe we should ask the crazy beings if they have any ideas. But something about those words made Kexthol stop flipping through his reports and really think. What kind of species could be so dangerous that the entire galactic community had agreed to just leave them alone? And more importantly, what might those dangerous beings be capable that civilized warfare had never considered? When the human fleet drops out of hyperspace, it's like watching a biker gang show up to a chess tournament. But let me tell you exactly what the aliens saw that day, because it was something that would change their entire understanding of what warfare could look like. Picture the most pristine, perfectly engineered alien warships you can imagine. These council vessels are works of art. Smooth curves, gleaming surfaces, energy fields that shimmer like aurora lights. Everything designed for maximum efficiency, minimum waste, perfect harmony between form and function. Their weapons are precisely calibrated, their shields mathematically optimized, their crews trained in tactics that have been refined over thousands of years. Now imagine a bunch of beat-up pickup trucks rolling into a Formula One race. The human ships look like they'd been through a blender, patched, scarred, held together with what the aliens could only assume was duct tape and pure stubbornness. But here's the thing that really freaked out the council observers. These ships shouldn't have been able to function. According to every engineering principle known to galactic civilization, half of these vessels should have fallen apart the moment they entered normal space. The energy readings coming off these vessels were making every sensor in the council fleet scream danger warnings. Not because the humans had some super advanced technology, but because their technology was completely insane. They were running reactors at temperatures that should have melted their hulls. Their weapons were drawing power levels that should have overloaded every circuit on their ships. Their shields were fluctuating in patterns that looked more like controlled explosions than defensive systems. One of the council senior engineers actually had what could only be described as a nervous breakdown when he analyzed the human ship designs. These weren't ships built by advanced technology. They were ships built by beings who had looked at the laws of physics, laughed, and decided to negotiate their own terms with the universe. Captain Rebecca Hayes stands on the bridge of something called the USS Defiance, and everything about her screams, "I don't have time for your problems." She's casually chewing on what her crew calls coffee grounds, which, by the way, turns out to be a mildly toxic stimulant that would probably kill most alien species. She's reading intelligence reports that would send most species into therapy, reports about an unstoppable enemy that adapts to everything, learns from every encounter, and has been steamrolling through the galaxy like some cosmic lawnmower. Her response to learning about this existential threat to all life in the galaxy? She asks her weapons officer if they remember to pack the special missiles. Her crew? They're checking their weapons and cracking jokes about whose turn it is to ram something. And they're not joking. These humans have actual rotation schedules for suicide missions. They've made ramming enemy ships into such a standard tactic that they have protocols, procedures, and apparently a waiting list of volunteers. The Council Liaison, a being whose species has been perfecting diplomatic relations for longer than humans have existed, starts trying to explain the situation. He's using all the proper diplomatic language, carefully outlining the strategic challenges, the adaptive capabilities of the enemy, the mathematical impossibility of victory through conventional means. When the Council Liaison starts stammering about how impossible it is to fight an adaptive enemy, Hayes just grins. Not a polite diplomatic smile. Not a reassuring expression. A grin that looks like she just heard the best news of her entire life. She explains, in the most matter-of-fact way possible, that humanity's been fighting adaptive enemies since they first picked up pointy sticks to deal with saber-toothed cats. She starts listing off examples like she's reading a grocery list. Viruses that adapt to medicine. So humans just make stronger medicine. Predators that learn to avoid human traps. So humans make better traps. Weather patterns that try to kill human crops. So humans move the crops or change the weather. The council liaison tries to explain that this is different, that the swarm learns from everything, adapts to every strategy. Hayes nods along like she's listening to someone explain that water is wet. Then she mentions that humans spent most of their evolutionary history being hunted by creatures that were bigger, stronger, faster, and had better senses. The human response wasn't to become bigger or stronger. It was to become meaner, more creative, and more willing to try absolutely insane solutions to problems. When bacteria developed resistance to antibiotics, humans didn't give up. They started using viruses to kill bacteria. When insects adapted to pesticides, humans started using other insects as weapons. When their own planet tried to kill them with ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and mass extinction events, humans just stubbornly refused to go extinct and kept finding new ways to survive. The aliens started to realize they're not dealing with a typical military force. These humans don't think like soldiers. They think like survivors. And survivors don't fight fair, don't follow rules, and definitely don't give up just because the odds are mathematically impossible. They brought something to this fight that the swarm had never encountered before: weaponized human stubbornness. The kind of stubborn that looks at an impossible situation and says, "Hold my drink and watch this." The kind of stubborn that had turned a species from prey animals into the apex predators of their own death world. The kind of stubborn that was about to teach the galaxy what happens when you mess with beings who consider impossible to be a personal challenge. The first time humans engage the swarm, every military manual in the galaxy gets thrown out the window. And I'm not talking about minor tactical adjustments here. We're talking about completely rewriting the fundamental rules of how space combat is supposed to work. The council observers watching from their safe distance had front-row seats to what can only be described as organized insanity with military-grade explosives. Picture traditional galactic warfare. It's like a chess match between supercomputers. Every move is calculated 3 steps ahead. Ships maintain optimal firing distances. Weapons are deployed in mathematically perfect patterns. And retreat protocols are activated the moment victory becomes statistically unlikely. It's efficient, logical, and predictable. Exactly what the swarm had been learning to counter for the past 3 cycles. Then the humans show up and flip the entire game board upside down. These aren't calculated, efficient tactics. This is pure chaos with a side of, hold my beer and watch this. The first human ship to engage the swarm didn't even bother with long-range weapons. Captain Lisa Park of the UES Reckless, and yes, that was actually the ship's name, took one look at the swarm formation and ordered a direct ramming course at maximum engine power. The council observers thought she'd lost her mind. Ships don't ram other ships in civilized warfare. It's wasteful, inefficient, and usually results in the destruction of both vessels. But humans apparently looked at that last part and thought, sounds like a fair trade. Suicide runs aren't desperate last stand for humans. They're opening moves. Before the swarm could even begin analyzing human tactics, 3 more ships had followed Park's lead, turning themselves into guided missiles and smashing into swarm vessels with enough force to crack planets. But here's the crazy part. The humans didn't consider these suicide runs at all. They had escape pods, ejection seats, and what they cheerfully called emergency bailout procedures that involved literally jumping out of exploding spaceships and somehow surviving when their fancy weapons got adapted against, which happened in about 15 minutes, because the swarm was nothing if not efficient. The humans started making new ones out of literally whatever was floating around in space. And I mean literally whatever. Lieutenant Jake Murphy became something of a legend that day when he started welding plasma cutters, tools designed for ship maintenance, to missile warheads. Not because anyone told him to, not because it was in any manual, but because he looked at the situation and thought, you know what? This might work. Spoiler alert, it worked spectacularly. Sergeant Amy Foster went one step further and turned life support systems into improvised bombs. She figured out that if you overload an oxygen recycler and mix it with coolant from the environmental systems, you get an explosion that the swarm definitely wasn't expecting. When asked later why she thought this was a good idea, her response was, well, We weren't using the oxygen anyway. The human approach to weapon improvisation was like watching a garage sale turn into an arms factory. Spare parts became shrapnel bombs. Navigation computers were rewired into guidance systems for makeshift torpedoes. One enterprising engineer even figured out how to turn the ship's coffee maker into some kind of chemical weapon, though nobody was quite sure how that worked, and frankly, nobody wanted to ask. When the swarm adapted to energy weapons, the humans switched to throwing rocks. Really, really fast rocks. But not just any rocks. They were throwing chunks of their own destroyed ships, pieces of swarm debris, and in one memorable case, an entire asteroid that they'd somehow managed to accelerate to a significant percentage of light speed using nothing but improvised rocket engines and what appeared to be controlled nuclear explosions. The swarm's entire adaptation system, designed to counter logical military progression, just couldn't process the sheer insanity of human warfare. This system had been built to analyze patterns, predict tactical evolution, and develop countermeasures based on mathematical principles. It was like the ultimate military AI, designed to outthink any opponent. But how do you outthink an opponent that doesn't think? How do you predict the behavior of beings who make decisions based on what seems like the most entertaining option at any given moment? The swarm tried to adapt to human ramming tactics by developing stronger hulls. So humans started ramming them with ships carrying nuclear reactors set to overload on impact. The swarm developed point defense systems to stop incoming projectiles. So humans started firing projectiles that looked like debris, but were actually remote-controlled bombs disguised as random space junk. When the swarm created shields to deflect human attacks, the humans responded by flying inside the shield perimeters and setting off explosives from within. When the swarm adapted its biomechanical systems to resist human weapons, the humans started using fire, actual primitive fire, to burn out the organic components. But the moment that really broke the swarm's adaptation protocols was when human crews started deliberately infecting themselves with swarm biomechanical organisms, then using their own immune systems as weapons. How do you adapt to an enemy that sets itself on fire just to burn out your biomechanical infections? The answer, as it turned out, was simple. You don't. You run. When the smoke clears, the galaxy is left staring at something nobody expected. The swarm in full retreat. Not tactical withdrawal, not regrouping. Full-on nope, we're out, retreat. And let me tell you, watching an unstoppable cosmic horror decide to pack up and leave because they met something scarier than them, that's the kind of thing that changes your entire perspective on the universe. For 3 cycles, this swarm had been the boogeyman of galactic civilization. These were creatures that had adapted to every weapon, countered every strategy, and consumed entire star systems like cosmic locusts. Military analysts had calculated that nothing could stop them. Philosophers had started writing about the end of intelligent life in the universe. Some species had already begun preparing their cultural archives to launch into deep space, hoping that maybe some future civilization would find them and remember that they once existed. Then humans showed up for one battle, and suddenly the unstoppable force decided it had somewhere else to be. The humans didn't just win. They scared their enemies so badly that these reality-consuming nightmare creatures decided that discretion was the better part of valor. Think about that for a moment. Beings that had been systematically devouring everything in their path for cycles, creatures that had shown zero fear when facing the combined might of galactic civilization, took one look at human warfare tactics and essentially said, "You know what? We're good. We'll find another galaxy to consume." The council observers were frantically trying to understand what they'd just witnessed. Their sensor data showed impossible things. Human ships that should have been destroyed continuing to fight, weapons that violated several laws of physics working perfectly fine, and combat tactics that appear to be based more on entertainment value than strategic effectiveness. While the human fleet patches holes in their ships with actual swarm materials, because waste not, want not, the aliens are having what can only be described as existential crises. Captain Rebecca Hayes is literally using pieces of defeated enemy ships to fix her own vessel while casually discussing lunch plans with her crew. When council representatives finally work up the courage to approach the human fleet, they're expecting some kind of grand military debriefing, detailed tactical analysis, maybe even a victory ceremony. Instead, they find humans playing cards with swarm technology, trying to figure out if the biomechanical components can be turned into better coffee makers. Captain Hayes responds to the Council's shell-shocked questions with typical human pragmatism. When Ambassador Kexthal asks about their incredible victory over a supposedly unbeatable enemy, Hayes just shrugs and says they didn't do anything special. They just applied the basic truth their species learned on their way up from the bottom of the food chain. When something's trying to kill you, you don't just fight back. You make sure it regrets being born. But the aliens want specifics. How did humans defeat an adaptive enemy that crushed every conventional military force? Hayes starts explaining like she's describing how to change a tire. Humans have been dealing with adaptive threats their entire evolutionary history. Diseases that adapted to treatments? Humans adapted faster. Predators that learned human hunting patterns? Humans changed the patterns or just eliminated the predators entirely. The key difference, Hayes explains, was that other species approached the swarm problem like it was a puzzle to be solved logically. Humans approached it like it was a bully that needed to be taught a lesson. And humans, having spent thousands of years being the scrappy underdogs on a planet that was actively trying to kill them, had gotten very good at teaching bullies lessons they'd never forget. What really disturbed the Council was how casual the humans were about the whole thing. They were treating the defeat of a galaxy-threatening enemy like it was just another day at the office. When asked if they were proud of their victory, one human engineer replied that it was pretty fun, and asked if there were any other cosmic horrors that needed dealing with because his crew was getting bored. The galaxy watches in a mixture of awe and terror as humanity offers to share what they cheerfully call aggressive problem-solving techniques with other species. The humans are genuinely confused by everyone's shock reactions. From their perspective, they just use basic survival skills that every human learned growing up on Earth, a planet where everything from the weather to the wildlife to bacteria was constantly trying to kill you. They start offering training programs with names like Creative Combat Solutions and Advanced Improvised Weaponry Workshops. When Council representatives politely ask what these courses would involve, humans start explaining techniques for turning household items into defensive tools, methods for psychological warfare, using nothing but creative thinking, and something they call tactical insanity, that involves being so unpredictable that enemies give up trying to fight you. Finally, everyone understands exactly why these Deathworlders were quarantined in the first place. It wasn't because they were evil or aggressive. It was because they were absolutely terrified in their creativity and completely unhinged in their problem-solving approaches. They'd been quarantined not to protect the galaxy from human violence, but to protect the galaxy from human ingenuity applied to combat situations. Sometimes the best defense isn't a good offense. It's absolute, unhinged chaos delivered by beings who evolve on a planet actively trying to kill them every single day. And sometimes, when the universe sends you an unstoppable threat, the solution isn't better technology or superior strategy. Sometimes the solution is humans.